And thank you for joining Harvard Alumni for Global Development for the Leaders in Global Development Speaker Series featuring Mark Elliott, President of the Africa Division at Mastercard. My name is Zaina. I'm the President of Harvard Alumni for Global Development. I'm honored to moderate this discussion today. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping notes to be mindful of throughout the session. Audience members will have the opportunity to ask questions towards the end of the program. So please feel free to use the chat box below to input any questions you may have for Mr. Elliott. You are also welcome to engage with the event's participants using the same chat box below. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be available to view after the event. We will share those details with you on how to view the recording following the discussion. Also, before we begin, I want to make sure that you stay connected with HAGD on social media. We are Harvard Alumni for Global Development on all platforms. That's Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And make sure that you visit our website because we have a host of events happening the first half of this year, and we hope that you all can join us. Some are in person and some will be virtual. All right, so we're about to dive in, but first, I'd like to learn more about our audience. So by either show of hands or in the chat box below, I'd like to know how many of you all are joining us from the eastern part of the world? Anyone here? Okay. Is there anyone that is joining us from the western part of the world? By show of hands or... Okay, so I guess everyone is just everywhere, which is great. Okay. I know we have some folks that are joining us from Washington, D.C. We have some folks from New York. We have folks from Israel, India, Australia. I see we have some folks from all over the world. And hopefully all of you all work in global development. And so, again, this discussion will be very useful for you as you all engage in your work or whatever it is that you do here. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm moderating and I'm also doing behind the scenes work at the same time. All right, so here we go. I want to make sure Mr. Elliott can hear us as well.
I can hear you now. Yeah, I was struggling a little bit, but I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure you were with us. All right, so without further ado, I would now like to introduce our guest, Mr. Mark Elliott. Mr. Elliott is Mastercard's Division President Africa and leads the team that is expanding payments, extending services, and embracing new networks across the region. Prior to Mastercard, he worked at Barclays Group London, where he worked in the M&A team, leading on acquisitions and divestments across the Nordics and Europe. Before moving into commercial roles based in South Africa and Dubai, he started his career as a chartered accountant at Arthur Andersen London before moving to PwC and ING Barings Hong Kong with a focus on financial institutions M&A. Mr. Elliott, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. The screen which you've pinned is the one which I'm dialing in from my mobile so I can talk. But this is my, the one which I'm waving in is me. Okay. Hi, everyone.
Well, thankfully, it syncs up. Your audio and your video is perfect. So okay, just keep it the way it is. That's fine.
Great. No, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you here. So, Mr. Elliott, I always like to start with the beginning with these type of discussions. I did some research on your background, and you began your life's journey in London before making the trek to India, and then Hong Kong, and now South Africa, among other places across the globe. Talk to us a little bit about your upbringing and how did your childhood shape the life that you lead today?
Sure. So, my father was a journalist with the Financial Times. And so he did a lot of industrial trade union related activity in London in the 80s, and then there was an opportunity to move overseas, and so he carted us all off at the age of 10 to Delhi, and I went to the American school there. I think at such a young age to be around poverty and some of the issues which India had and has, it really opens your eyes to the bigger world that's out there, and actually how fast-paced and interesting everything is outside of the town in which you grow up in, right? And I think through that experience, we traveled a lot, and my father has obviously, as a journalist, a deep curiosity. And so we traveled extensively, and I guess that's similar to what I do today. I continue to travel extensively, and I guess travel is a passion. So in a funny way, I've also found a career which allows me to travel and to meet new people, and I enjoy diversity. I enjoy showing up and meeting people for the first time, and I enjoy finding new things. So that's really what brings me till today.
Yeah, I think for many people who, reach the levels of their careers that you have, it's all about exploration. And I noticed that you said finding a lot in your response, which leads me to my next question about your current role at Mastercard. So you coordinate the overall performance, the strategic direction, brand development of the Africa division at Mastercard, which is a huge global corporation. Talk to me about what's a typical day like for you?
Well, I mean, I could tell you about today, and maybe we'll see if that's typical. So, I start my day, with some people sessions, setting up the week, depending on what's a priority. And then I had a call with a CEO in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is for us a high potential, large country with over 100 million people, which is just opening up for the first time. So we checked in over there. Towards the end of the morning, somebody reached out to me. I had a 30-minute gap, and they are thinking about some M&A activity and interested if Mastercard wants to, be a part of that opportunity. And then, over my lunch, I was looking at the financials for the month and seeing what my landing's going to be for January. So, and then somebody wants to talk to me about whether they can increase their T&E budget because they think it's too small and they want to travel. So it's what I tend to do is I tend to get involved in big newsworthy M&A activity, but then I also get questions around somebody spending $5,000 on some T&E. So we really get pulled in lots of different directions.
So that's just obviously your day to day is not typical. It varies.
It's every day is different. Every day is different.
Absolutely.
Every day is different. But I think the importance of my role though is to ensure that I've got a team in place so that I can think strategically, and trust them to do the day to day. And so if I spend too much time on one country or one area of Africa dealing with certain issues, it shows me that maybe I need to do something about the bench strength. And that's a constant challenge when you're in a relatively fast growing organization, is that the leaders get pulled down into the minutiae and they don't get back out so they can think differently to the others about where we're going as a company.
Absolutely. You mentioned opportunity, and you mentioned Africa, you being on the continent. I mean, I think, everyone here is very well aware of the opportunities that is grown on the continent. And United Nations revealed figures about a couple of years ago stating that 1 in 4 people in the entire world will come from the African continent by 2030. So obviously there are a lot of opportunities happening on the continent now. Mr. Elliott, could you provide some context around the opportunities that you see on the continent from your vantage?
So if 1 in 4 people are going to be in Africa, then that also means the median age is going to drop, right? So it's going to drop to something like 19 or very low. And so that means we're going to have a massive youth bulge, and they're really then going to be driving things like digital solutions. And so it becomes a very fertile ground for innovation. the important thing as well then is other aspects of the fundamentals. So we expect GDP growth to probably pop up a little bit to about 3.5 to 4.5% this year alone. And then from a payment standpoint, the runway is pretty long. I mean, still 90% of payments are still in cash. So there's significant runway. Against that backdrop, though, we have to remember that 60% of Africa's population is still unbanked. And so digitization can become a catalyst for financial inclusion. And, you know, what you probably have also read in the news wires is that Africa is the largest adopter of mobile money, accounting for about 70% of the world's mobile money value. Mm-hmm. So I think when you put all of that together and you say, so how are we going to take this thing forward? Well, smartphone penetration is pervasive, and provides us with that opportunity to leapfrog some of the other evolutions that have happened elsewhere in the world. And smartphone penetration can be anything between about 55% on average up to 95% in certain countries. So as somebody in my line of work, that utility, if you like, in the palm of people's hands becomes terribly important as we think about the future. It makes us super positive. It makes us super positive about the potential and unlocking that potential.
Sure. Yeah, you raise a lot of great points. I specifically had a light bulb moment when you discussed financial inclusion and talked about what that means on the continent of Africa. And, you know, you mentioned this, but it's largely driven by the adoption of mobile money accounts. And so, you know, for other leaders in other regions and industries, how do they learn from that success? Because that wasn't an easy task. To implement mobile money on the continent and for it to just do so well there. And what challenges also, so this is a two-part question. First, what can other regional leaders and other industries learn? And then what challenges remain in ensuring sustainable growth in financial inclusion across the continent?
Look, I mean, I think that mobile technology is clearly an enabler, with about 65% of the population now having access to 4G. And, you know, the growth off the back of that has been phenomenal. The enabler, if you like, is it enables jobs. It enables new parts of the workforce to come into the broader economy. And, you know, we have ensured to take that very seriously in our own strategy. So we've actually bought stakes in the likes of MTN and Airtel because we believe that there is almost a fintech approach to how we need to broad base what mobile money has already done beyond the P2P transaction. Because mobile money was made very famous by M-Pesa in Kenya. But it's obviously pervasive across Africa. And initially was just this P2P use case. What I think has become apparent is that the MNOs have been very good at building out that use case beyond P2P. And so it's effectively a functional debit, if you like. And it doesn't necessarily mean that card growth is going to displace what's already there from a mobile money standpoint. So I think the lessons to be learned are that, in your geography, it's not to say that, that America's payment strategy or China's payment strategy is necessarily going to be the one that's successful in your geo. That's the lesson for us. I think Africa is going to create its own narrative because it's got its own headwinds and tailwinds. And that's really where the opportunity is. And so I think that's probably the lesson. There's still, though, a lot of lessons to be resolved as well. So, we know that remittances, for example, across the continent are extremely expensive. I think best in class for a cost of remittance globally is probably high 4% in Southeast Asia. But in parts of Africa, it's as high as 10%. So there's a lot to solve from the players that are already established, to become more interoperable with each other and also to drive down cost, because cost is still prohibitive. And what that then leads is there's a strong informal economy in a lot of these countries, which is still more successful in many ways than the formal system. So what we need to do as Mastercard is we need to think about ways that we can help and to remove what's effectively a cost of cash, which can be up to 2.5% of a country's GDP. And the way that we do that is by obviously thinking about how we make payments more cost effective on the continent. And that means we have to think about different approaches, different price points, and also maybe more pay-as-you-go type of models, which are more relevant to Africa than they might be relevant to other parts of the world. So I think probably solutioning in Africa for Africa is a mantra which I believe in. And we've got lots of great examples. I mean, if anyone is interested, I can talk about some of the things we actually have homegrown, and we've made great success out of it. So I think the trick is to focus on your geo, your headwinds and tailwinds, and what your customers want. And the reality is that people have identified, like in many industries around the world, that the margins are, healthy in certain industries like payments. And so there's no end of fintechs who are looking to take advantage of this opportunity. And so as a leader, it's also important for us to kind of realize that and to change and adapt and change our model.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned cost effective, and I want to kind of just piggyback off of that, because how realistic do you think that is with the way things are going in fintech and in other emerging technologies? Do you think that is realistic, though, to kind of lower price points, become more cost effective? Do you think that that's something that's under the realm of what you can do? I mean, I know it's optimistic to say, yeah, sure, it can be done, but realistically, how do you think?
Yeah, I mean, let me give you one example. So, if you think about the Kenyan ecosystem, for example, the pervasive, so let's say 98% of all payment traffic in Kenya is with M-Pesa, which means that only 2% is with the schemes. So if I tell my boss, hey, I've got 50% share, I've got 50% of 2%, which is 1%, which isn't a lot, right? So then the question is, so what are you going to do about it? If you want to take payments seriously in Kenya, what are you going to do about it? And so what we've done is we've said, well, the reality is there's still a lot of cash out there. But traditional point of sale machines at $300-400 a pop doesn't really make sense. So let's get creative about different forms of acceptance, which is more attractive to merchants. So we started by working with the government by getting digitally interoperable QR available as a form of acceptance. And then what I did was I then said, okay, let's aggressively get merchant acceptance out there by dropping the price which a merchant has to pay when they accept a payment. So we went to 0% for 2 years. So now a merchant no longer needs to have a $300-400 terminal. They need a sticker. And along with that sticker, they know that the price of accepting that payment will be 0 for 2 years. And similarly, we on tap on phone, we went to 25 bips, and on traditional point of sale, we went to 50 bips. So that makes it really interesting from a merchant perspective. What we can also do is we can work with the banks so that when these merchants start to adopt this more financially inclusive way of accepting payments, is to enable the collection of data around the merchants so that they can then potentially avail credit at some point in the future. So that clearly is a great example of how, being, I guess, understanding the merchant's pain points, the problem statement from a merchant's perspective, and what it's going to take to persuade them to actually bring the terminal out rather than just taking cash or potentially a mobile money transaction, is to incent, but also to allow them to understand how it might enable and elevate their business into the future.
Sure. Yeah. As you were speaking, it reminds me, so I lived on the continent for 5 years. I lived in Ghana, and the latter half of my time there, the government had implemented this e-levy tax for folks to be able to withdraw money out of their mobile money accounts. And it was very, very draining to, the local there. They're now talked that they're going to reverse that e-levy, but,
wait.
I'm sorry. Please mute your microphones if you can. Thank you. But anyway, I think, I don't want to complicate this discussion because it can get, very muddy, but, I think there's also a component of government that the role that government plays in these type of situations as well. But I want to switch gears here. And I want to talk more about access because that's something that you had mentioned as well. And, as Africa works to promote more account access and usage, how would you, or what advice would you give to stakeholders, to address the disparities in financial inclusion, based on several factors: gender, income, education, age? How do we work to create more financial inclusion to create a more equitable financial ecosystem?
Sure. So it's a great question. So I think, when we talk about Africa, I mentioned earlier that 60% are banked, but 90% of the transactions are cash. So there are heavy disparities, across income, gender, education, etc. And we also know that 50% of Africa's workforce is women. And they face systemic barriers, i.e. limited access to certain financial products, digital literacy, and other things. So we as a pledge, Mastercard has committed to connecting 1 billion people and 50 million micro and medium-sized SMEs, as well as 25 million of them being women. But let me tell you about something which we started in a financial inclusion lab in Kenya with the Gates Foundation many years back, and we've now marketed. And we call this Community Pass. And so what Community Pass is it's focusing on the agricultural segment, which is 55-60% of the continent's workforce focused on agriculture. And what it is it's a digitally interoperable platform that we've created, whereby a farmer can onboard to this platform, and they can then market their product to the buyers and remove the middlemen from the equation, which is very interesting. So they can actually organize the collection of the goods from the farm and the sale, and it's settled through that platform. The agri providers also have access to the platform so that they can, through the harvesting period, market their services. And then the banks also are part of this platform so that they can look at the data and see whether they can more responsibly lend to the farming community. So this is a great example of where, we now have over 5 million farmers across East Africa on the platform. And we've also then signed a collaboration agreement called the Made Alliance, where we've made a commitment with American companies, and companies in Africa, which has got some oversight from, the White House, to actually enable digital services to over 100 million people by 2030. So what I've just described is, it was created 5-6 years ago, in a lab. It's now being commercialized with very segment focus. We've got on board over 5 million farmers across East Africa. And then we also have this bigger goals that we're now setting for ourselves so that we can go much deeper into this segment. So I think that's a great example of where we have access. Pivoting a little bit, you will also know that there's a lot of fintechs, running around Africa trying to insert themselves into opportunities. And we know that they want to focus on doing that rather than, how to get payments going as part of their model. And so we also have various programs so that we can help fintechs with speed to market. And so the way we do that is by working with other fintechs. So for example, in West Africa, there's something called Blue Salt, and they can actually enable they're a fintech who enables other fintechs to get to market quicker. And we have things like Start Path, where businesses that are going through Series C can get more funding and be part of the Mastercard network. And then we also have things like FinTech Express, where businesses can plug themselves into the Mastercard network more quickly. So that's, I guess, another lens on your question around access, about how we're not necessarily working with specific segments, but how we're enabling on a B2B basis companies to get speed to market and to move faster.
Sure. Thank you. I also recently saw that you all had collaborated with CanFed to help with digital literacy for young women in marginalized communities in Zambia, and I thought that was quite impressive. So people are very well aware of the great work that Mastercard has been doing on the continent and beyond.
Thank you.
So, yeah, sure. I want to ask a little bit some more lighthearted questions. I mean, if you can believe it, half of our time is gone here. So I just want to, I want to know, and I'm pretty sure many of us want to know, what surprises you the most about your job? Is there anything that you expected differently before entering the sector that you're in?
Look, I think I would say that it's incredible how passionate people are about and companies are about wanting to see Africa succeed. So I think there's a lot of collaboration which is actually mind blowing. And so we get no shortage of offers to support the drive. So I think that's a very good surprise. I think one of the things which is difficult sometimes is this reliance on third parties in terms of speed of moving things. So I think that's not unique to Africa, but I would always want to move faster. And so I think when charting a strategy, having more control of the different pieces of the jigsaw puzzle it reduces the risk of execution. So I think that would be another call out, is how do you control the different parts of the jigsaw puzzle so that you know that when you want to deliver something, it's actually going to deliver. I think the other thing which is pertinent to Africa, so I'm jumping around a little bit here, is obviously is how affected Africa is by crop crises, and how that can actually really affect nations. And so you turn up and you'll be in a country and you think you're going to have a strong meeting about business, but actually, the challenges in that country are so pervasive to the welfare of the country that's actually more important than probably what you're about to discuss from a Mastercard perspective. So I think that's the other reality of working in Africa is the tough side of some of the welfare of people who live here.
Sure. Yeah. I think leaders by nature just have this innate thing of just wanting to move faster. And it's no matter how fast people can go, it's just do it faster. Yeah, I understand. So yeah, it's a reality. So what is work-life balance like for you? Does that even exist in your line of work?
I think I've got better at it. So I would say about 10 years ago, I just decided that I wasn't going to work past a certain time in the evening, because it had just got to that point where I needed to make that call. So I implemented that, although I obviously break that every now and again. I think the most important thing is, from a family perspective, is to try and keep the weekend intact. And that's what they just asked me to do. So if I can be back for Friday evening, that's good, and expected. And as much as possible, try not to break Sunday. So, that's probably what it is. The other things which it's probably more my age, but, the other things which I've done is I've, reduced the longer exercise. So I used to be very deep into things like triathlon. And I've tried to make my exercise more efficient and also to do more spiritual stuff. So, I do a bit of yoga and stuff like that. And I find that actually keeps me quite balanced. So I have the sense of inner calm, which people find a little bit weird, but I don't mind a crisis.
Yeah, yeah. So all the future presidents out there, make sure you take note on that. That's important. Balance is very important. And our vice president of administration is on the call, Karen.